Let's dive into the discussions shaping the nation.
Yeah, Gurmalga Cahirlik, and may I thank Social Democrats for bringing forward this motion initially. And as I proceed to completely disagree with you, I do think this is a good thing, that we were able to have a frank and open debate in this chamber. And Deputy O'Donoghue, I'd like to absolutely agree with you in paying credit to the men and women of our defence forces and the service they give of their state currently and previously. And it is great pride that I see our Taoiseach and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Defence currently visiting the over 300 Irish troops who are on deployment as peacekeepers in the most perilous of situations, doing good work, important work, and that will continue regardless of the aspirations of the government or some of the comments made in the chamber. I'd like to respond to a couple of the points specifically in the opposition motion before laying out a few clear opinions of the government, responses to some of the comments made in the chamber, and laying out the genesis for our counter motion, which I will be putting to the House Cahirlik at the end of my contribution. First and foremost, I really do welcome the opportunity for this debate, and the point I'd like to make and the consideration is it is a novel suggestion and indeed an unprecedented suggestion for a plebiscite. We live in a parliamentary democracy. We have elections regularly. We have a smooth transition of power in the entire 103 years of our establishment as an independent state and democracy. We regularly have referenda. Probably, except for Switzerland, would have the most referenda than any on the continent of Europe. We do consult people. The notion of having a plebiscite in advance of any parliamentary or legislative debate or any decision for a non-constitutional matter is something that, yes, is unprecedented, but kind of is innovative, and I commend the innovation, but I don't actually agree with. And I think it's okay to disagree agreeably, Deputy O'Leary, which you and I do regularly on the basis and without giggles and smirks. And I think the consistent references to referenda on this, beyond the plebiscite, and on neutrality more generally, poses some really interesting questions. Respectfully, Deputy O'Donoghue, we don't govern by opinion polls. And I can show you 100 opinion polls that seek to back my argument, and you can show me 100 that will back another argument. We govern by democracy. We govern by the basis of results of elections, and we look at the numbers in the chamber when we make decisions. And when we make decisions based on a legislative basis, we look back at manifestos and programme for government. And I've been a member of Fine Gael my entire adult life, and at every single Fine Gael Ardèche, we have committed to seek to abolish the triple lock. And the people who voted for me in Dublin Rathdown and my colleague, Maeve O'Connell, did so well aware of that. The 35% in that constituency knew exactly what they were voting for when they backed me. And I just think if we are having this debate, we have it in the context of how the triple lock actually came into being, why it exists, and what is the footing for it. When this House debated UN membership initially, the concern at that time, quite some time before probably any of us here was born, was that UN membership and its obligations would end Ireland's military neutrality. The triple lock was devised as the mechanism to offer reassurance. It is not set out in our constitution. It is not an expression of Ireland's policy of military neutrality, but rather the legislative basis to give effect to the obligation of UN membership and how that would operate. And that's just me stating fact that's on the record of this House for quite some time. And what the government is seeking to do is make an alteration to that so we can be more flexible in the deployment of our peacekeepers. Now, a lot of people have said this is the end of neutrality or the end of military neutrality. And can I quite frankly say this does not change one iota our policy of military neutrality. And I say that as someone whose personal opinion is that we should end our military neutrality. But that is not the opinion of this House. That is not the opinion of the people of Ireland. It's not the opinion of the government of which I'm a member of. I accept that limit of democracy, but I'm allowed to have a personal opinion. This doesn't change our policy of military neutrality. This proposal that the government is talking about. And I think that's important to put to people. And this notion that we use neutrality as a broad brush terms ignores the fact that we aren't politically neutral. Clearly not. You can say that to the people of Ukraine. You can say that to the 26 other member states of the European Union. And you can say that to an abundance of other sovereign independent countries who we have various agreements and memoranda of understanding with. But just the facts of the matter, what the government is proposing here, despite the calls that this is being rushed. The government planned, as per the general scheme of the 4th of March, to introduce this. The legislation, any the legislation will allow ample opportunity for the Dáil and Seanad to provide scrutiny both as pre-legislative and within the legislative processes. There's no rush in this. Any revised legislative framework will continue to require Government and Dáil approval, where appropriate, for the dispatch of Defence Forces personnel to partake in peacekeeping and similar missions. These proposals will remain fully consistent with the principles of the UN Charter and international law. The legislative changes proposed will amend provisions relating to the deployment of Defence Forces personnel in non-combatant evacuation operations to support Irish citizens and contribute to the protection of our embassies and close protection duties overseas. The proposed changes will allow us to respond to crisis situations with more agility and will not change Ireland's traditional policy of military neutrality, as I've laid out. It is important, therefore, to be clear on precisely what we are actually discussing. The mechanism for the deployment of Defence Forces personnel is provided for in Section 2 of the Defence Amendment No. 2 Act of 1960, predating both the Nice and Lisbon treaties, and what these declarations did, and I campaigned for both of them, both times, was reaffirm Ireland's right and choice to decide our own defence policy. And it must be referred to, and it is somehow dismissed that this is non-consequential, that there are an abundance of precedences in very recent years, because there hasn't been a UN-mandated peacekeeping mission in 11 years, where Ireland simply hasn't been able to participate. We weren't able to participate in the efforts in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia due to a veto by the People's Republic of China. We had to join Operation Sophia in the Mediterranean a year later than everyone else, because the UN wouldn't provide a mandate. We were not able to participate in the UN-backed counter-narcotic mission across the Atlantic based out of Portugal. We weren't able to renew for 18 months our participation in EU-led missions in Bosnia-Herzegovina. These are all things that were stopped. And this notion that somehow the UN Security Council is not impacting, or members of the UN Security Council is not impacting our own sovereignty, fly in the face of the actualities and the facts. Let me be utterly, utterly frank in stressing the importance of Ireland's continuing involvement in the United Nations, her agencies, and our commitment to multilateralism. I think we have to be very careful with this when we land this accusation. We are in a world that is ever evolving, ever changing, and is increasingly frightening, where other countries are turning their back on multilateralism, where other countries are withdrawing their funding, where other countries are diminishing the role of the UN agencies. In face of that, despite accusations here, Ireland has increased its involvement in the UN and our agencies. We brought forward funding to literally keep the lights on and keep people in employment. Every other European country has reduced their overseas development aid. We've increased ours. So do not dare for an instant say we are turning our back on multilateralism. We believe in it wholeheartedly. When certain deputies in this House were questioning the role of the European Union, I stand proudly to say that Ireland is a fully functioning, committed member of the European Union process and believes in that level of agreement and cooperation with our colleagues. But Caoirleach, it is important we do have a reasoned debate on this issue. And we should be able to enter into the spirit of wanting to have that reasoned debate from the basis of fact and actuality without simple political points scoring. I really, truly aspire for the space for us to be able to have a debate without in 30 seconds it descends into an accusation that we're looking to rush to join NATO. We are talking this morning, and I do welcome the opportunity to discuss this, and I thank again the Social Democrats for bringing forward this motion. We are talking about government-proposed changes to the Triple Lock. I aspire to have an abundance of debates in this chamber, in the Seanad, in committee, at pre-legislative stage, about why the government wants to do this, the merits and demerits of it, and we work at it together. And at the end of the day, I have no doubt we will disagree, but that will be democracy functioning and us having that full and welcome debate, and not taking to do it over social media, or not whittling out some mad conspiracy theories, as we've heard from other deputies, none present, I will state, in this chamber this morning, whittle it out, put it up on social media, and they're not even here to hear the response from the government. And I appreciate, I've been around here a while in both houses, I know how private members' debates work, and I know the importance of it. But I know it is important, therefore, of the government to quite clearly put out what we're trying to achieve in our counter-motion, that we do not believe a national plebiscite on this matter is either necessary nor appropriate, and I recognise that Ireland is increasingly spending time in a contested, dynamic and volatile international security environment. This counter-motion here further notes that the systematic challenges facing the UN Security Council obliges us to reconsider our existing legislation to ensure that dispatch of Defence Forces personnel overseas is decided solely by the sovereign representatives of the people of Ireland. Caoirleach, I'm pretty sure you're sanctioned by Russia like myself. I really don't want the Russian Federation to have a veto over our sovereign policy going forward, and I would like to think the vast majority of people in this House would agree with me. In this light, I call on this House to support the government's counter-motion.
Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.